I'm sure it's irritating, though, when we've got something really important to talk about, and I keep referring to you as that.
You have to say it 2 or 3 times before we get on with it.
Yeah, because if you don't acknowledge it the first time, I'm just going to keep doing it because I'm annoying that way.
Welcome to the Law Firm CMO Playbook Podcast, where elite lawyers and top legal industry marketers come for real conversations, proven strategies, and actionable insights that drive law firm growth and marketing excellence. And now, here are your hosts, Carl Downey and Matt Starosciak.
All right, everybody, here we go. Another episode of the Law Firm CMO Playbook Podcast. I'm Matt Starosciak. Sitting next to me is private, first class, Loudon, Carl Van Loon Downey. Do people in the industry know that's your real name, Carl?
You're the only one that knows that name, Matt.
We're not going to tell people why I call you that. We're going to let them figure it out. I think most probably will. But that's my nickname for Mr. Downey here.
I don't know if it's tied to anything related to marketing or maybe just movies.
Certainly not. Certainly not. I'm sure it's irritating, though, when we've got something really important to talk about, and I keep referring to you as that.
You have to say it 2 or 3 times before we get on with it.
Yeah, because if you don't acknowledge it the first time, I'm just going to keep doing it because I'm annoying that way.
That's right. No stolen valor here. I don't have any military background.
Yeah, that's funny. When I called you that the other day, the owner of the studio here was like, "Thanks for your service."
Yeah,
we had to immediately correct him so we didn't run into problems with our military friends. Well, anyway, it's great to be with you, Carl, and it is Carl Downey, fractional CMO extraordinaire. Great to be with you on another episode. Today we're going to talk about what size marketing budget is right for your law firm. It's a question we get a lot. It's a question we get a lot early on in our discussions with prospective new clients, and it's a tough one to answer, isn't it?
It is. It is. A lot of times firms I work with don't have the knowledge of their numbers to really even develop a qualified marketing budget.
Yeah.
They're just spending what felt right.
They're doing the best they can with what they have. But I think a lot of times what they come to us for is what is the real amount we need to be spending. And sometimes it's a process to figure that out, isn't it?
Yeah. It might take a couple of years of data to really crunch the numbers and analyze it. If you can go back 2 years, I think you can really find it. You can say, okay, this is what happened. This is what you spent. These are your costs per signups. What are your goals now? What do you want to happen? And when they share that, then you can work backwards and say, okay, we should invest this much to make that happen.
Yeah, and what variables are there, right? Have you brought on new attorneys? Do you want to increase practice areas? Do you want to expand geographically? We're going to talk about all that in today's episode, but there's a lot that goes into getting that number right. And then, of course, you've got to have some flexibility in there too, right?
Yeah, there's unpredictable factors that you have to weigh in.
No question. All right, so that's what we're going to cover today. We're going to give some real-world examples of budgets that we've implemented at different firms, probably leave the names off of them, but we're going to talk about the process of developing a law firm marketing budget, the factors that go into it, what the right amount might be. We're going to talk about some pitfalls. Should be a good episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Any initial words of wisdom for me, Carl?
Words of wisdom?
Yeah.
For talking about the marketing
things you think
budgets?
I need to work on personally or professionally.
All right. You put me on the spot there, Matt.
I know.
Circle back to how stubborn you are and moody you can be.
Yeah, those are a work in progress for sure. There's no question.
I think the biggest thing for you is to take seriously starting your hot yoga practice.
Yeah, I know. You keep inviting me to hot yoga, but I'm not sure I don't think I really have the body type for that kind of thing.
Not yet.
I mean, I could only plank for like 5 seconds. Isn't planking one of the things?
You can go down to your knees. You'll be fine.
Yeah. All right, Carl. Good to be with you, brother. So let's talk about the process of determining or developing or I guess creating a marketing budget for your law firm. What would you say are the keys to an effective process, Carl, or what does that typically look like for you when it's done well?
What works probably the best is to have your managing partner, leader of the firm, whatever. If you can have the person responsible for the books that actually has the true
Absolutely.
total marketing expenses and the history of that, if you have those two people involved, and then if there's somebody in the operation that owns the numbers for how many leads, how many signups they got, those three people should be able to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think managing partner for sure, or if it's some sort of committee or joint managing partners, they've got to be there. Your bookkeeper or maybe accountant, depending on who handles what tasks. A marketing professional, if you've got a marketing professional, I think most of the firms we work with don't have an in-house person, but obviously somebody like that.
I was assuming I was in the room. So when we were putting that together, I think I'd qualify as a marketing professional.
Yeah. And then anybody, of course, naturally, maybe. But yeah, I think that's right. And then any operations person in there who's kind of a key person in the firm for big decisions, I think.
Yeah.
And then in terms of what to come to that meeting with, I think any kind of analytics, right? So you had talked about cost per case, those kind of things. Any numbers that you have from years past or even months past need to show up in that room as well, right?
A lot of times the data's there, but they haven't figured out how to cut it up to find out what it means. Yeah. So that's a lot of times what happens. And sometimes they just don't have anything. Like they haven't collected the information, and you have to make decisions based on what you'd expect to get out of a campaign.
Yeah.
And then you can start to build a case for what your budget should be.
We have a client that we've worked on together who started their law practice last year, and they had come from another law practice, so they obviously had some knowledge coming from that. But, they were starting from scratch, and you were more involved in those early days than I was. What would you say were the keys to establishing their budget?
They had a specific goal that they built out in their business plan, right? So they knew what they wanted to have from a new client perspective and a revenue perspective in the first 6 months, in the first year, in the first 2 years. So that was critical because we knew what they wanted to get to. So then we looked at the expenses that were coming, and we looked at what their average value per type of case would be. And we knew we needed to generate a certain number of leads and a certain number of new clients from the marketing at a certain cost to be profitable. So we built it around that in theory, but we really did overestimate on what we had to spend. So we went in it with a bigger budget than maybe it looked like they needed. Yeah,
that's interesting. So what you're talking about there, I hear, is kind of working backwards into the budget. So here's what we want to generate revenue-wise. Here's what we anticipate coming in through word of mouth or non-marketing, non-hard dollar marketing. And then what does that leave? What's left after that?
Yeah.
And then I always like to think about, well, what's your average case value, right? So we know what we need. What's your average case value? Now we know how many cases we need to bring in. And then what's our cost per case? So you can work backwards from your revenue number and work backwards into that final marketing budget quite neatly and nicely. Now, there's a billion things that can alter that track, and we're going to talk about some of those in a minute. But I think working backwards is a great strategy. Not always intuitive for firms to do that, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's not what you learn in law school.
Yeah.
Right? So it can be a hard thing to do. If you have a bookkeeper and an accountant, they can get you started with thinking about it that way, but they're not going to spend your marketing budget.
What I see more often with firms, especially firms that are starting out, is let's cover all of these expenses, and then whatever's left, we're going to use for marketing. Do you see that? Have you seen that in the past?
Definitely marketing can be under prioritized in a business plan. And it's not a good scenario for that business.
No, it's not. And I've seen it so many times in my career where it's, what is our office space? What is our payroll, our malpractice insurance, whatever other costs go into running the business. And then at the end, here's what we're comfortable taking out of savings or taking out of whatever to do the marketing. And oftentimes it's just too low of a number.
Yeah. I mean, when you're going into business, you're starting a business, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be willing to take risks.
Yeah.
Marketing is a risk, but I'd say it's a bigger risk not to put the money into it than to put the money into it, because nobody's coming to that office if they don't find you that you prioritized. You don't need medical malpractice insurance if you don't have clients.
That's right.
So
it's underfunded a lot.
Yeah.
It's underprioritized and underfunded.
Yeah, and I'd say,
and it's
what like you could never look at it as a leftover investment. You have to look at it as, I need a budget to perform the way I want to perform.
Yeah.
If you have all the other expenses too, you might have to concede that you're going to borrow some money to start what you're doing.
What about realistic expectations? Do you run into that issue a lot, where folks think their marketing budget is going to produce more than it actually is? And how do you navigate that as a fractional CMO? In other words, do you see people thinking, well, my revenue is going to be a 5x or my revenue is going to be a 10x, when in actuality, in your experience, you've seen more of a 2 or 3x?
Expectations are important, so we're always trying to set those whenever we're delivering on a campaign or coming in. I had a firm that I worked with that had goals that they were looking for an annual growth. And after 3 months, we hadn't made any final decisions on new campaigns to deploy, but the partners of the firm were still showing me that we were under goal for what we wanted to drive on new clients signed up, right?
So nothing's changed, but the expectation was change.
The expectation was growth. And I was like, look, I can't make more clients come to you without implementing anything. Like nothing's changed. So I understand if you're frustrated that we haven't hit these goals, but we have to start doing things to make it happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the position you're in, and it does drive motivation to get it going to the next thing. So, and that's what happened there. Like you're right, let's do it. And then we did some new things.
Well, the issue I see and have seen over a lot of years is folks that believe the marketing is going to produce more than it is. And it isn't so much in the PI world. The PI world is kind of an outlier when it comes to marketing and revenues, because the cases can fluctuate in terms of value, right? You can hit home runs or dogs that are going to throw your numbers off. So if we're looking at more maybe consumer-based practice areas or things that are more even, like bankruptcy, criminal defense, employment, stuff like that, where there isn't those ups and downs, what I've seen over the years, Carl, is folks think their marketing dollar is going to produce more than it is. So they're thinking it's going to be a 12x or a 30x. I remember sitting with a young lawyer one time who was opening an immigration practice, and I said, what do you need revenue-wise, or what do you want to generate revenue-wise each month? And he said $30,000. And I said, well, that's great. $30,000 a month as a solo just coming out, and this is 15 years ago. I said, what is your monthly marketing budget? He said $1,000. I said, so you're expecting $1,000 to generate $30,000? Yes. And I had to tell him, I'm not the right solution for you for sure, because I can't make that happen. But do you find that firms are, first of all, do they ask that question to you? Do they say, if we spend this amount, what is the amount of revenue we're going to bring in? Or do they say, what's the factor that this is going to generate? Or do they really not talk in those?
Let's talk about MVA accident firms, right? So they're looking for auto accident cases. The standard in the industry that the firms talk about is a cost per acquisition that is between $2,000 and $3,000 per case, right?
Agree.
So budgets are kind of built around that. Campaigns are designed around that expectation. They don't all hit it. And when they don't hit it, that's where expectations are important, because sometimes you got to spend higher to get those, to make the phone ring the way you want, to get those cases to come in, and they contribute to your overall goal.
So maybe $3,700 per case acquisition.
Yeah. So you're at $3,700, but you hit your goal. And if you do the averages across all your campaigns, you're under $3,000, right?
Yeah.
But you just have one campaign that's contributing, but it's a higher cost per acquisition.
Yeah. And so how do you navigate that? Do you just accept it and say, okay, do you start moving money around, or how do you account for that?
Well, here's a good example. In this case, they might look at their cost per acquisition for organic leads, search engine optimization leads. And they might say, well, shit, they're only $1,500 a case over here, where our ad campaign spend is $3,700.
Yeah.
We want to do more here. And then you have to say, okay, so we can turn this off, stop spending this money over here. But you can't just plop it into SEO and get dynamically changing results in that month. So
it's not immediate.
Yeah. So I would argue you have to increase your marketing budget if you want to get more out of your SEO, because you still have to do this until this replaces that.
That's right.
Lead generation.
And how does that usually go over, Carl?
The way I explain it, they usually stick with their ad campaign.
Yeah.
It's great if you can get more out of organic SEO, but the real challenge with SEO right now is it's freaking changing so quickly with AI that you just don't know what's going to happen. I think that you got to be a lot more comfortable with an ad spend right now.
Yeah, and you got to carve out additional money for that AI stuff, I think.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I've heard you say it a lot, and sometimes I push back on you about it. But, you know, I think the real solution to that is you have to spend a little bit more to get some footing in this area while not abandoning what you know is working.
Yes.
How do you deal with personal injury firms where they might hit a home run or a big case one year? Do you separate that out? We've had clients that have hit home runs on different kind of cases over the years, and it throws the numbers off, right? Because you've got one case that's a $10 million case or a $5 million case, and it throws the numbers off. Do you ignore those? Is that an outlier for you? Do you pull that out of the numbers as you're looking to establish kind of baseline and what needs to be done in the following year?
I look at it with and without it. So because ideally you're going to have an aberration every year, right? So I might look at it like, what happened in the last 5 years? Did you have one of those aberrations every year? If it's a once in a lifetime, $10 million, $100 million thing that happened, then of course that's going to be an outlier that you can't deal with. But
they might be somewhat regular is what I hear you saying.
Yeah,
like one a year.
Yeah, you might get that. And in which case I think you should rely on it.
Yeah.
But you can also remove it and look at your average value per case differently, which is fine. The one thing I really like is when they get one of those outliers that we earmark some of that money and we use it to diversify the way we market.
Interesting. So let's talk about that. What about flexibility in the budget? That's a perfect example. Money comes in, an influx of money comes in, you're able to increase the spend. Sometimes it comes in from a case. It could come in other ways though, right? I mean, think about inheritance, right? Maybe you've been the beneficiary of somebody who's left you some money, right? It could change things a little bit for the firm, could it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Other things that might require flexibility. Change in personnel, change in the law. What are the other things that you can think of that would change a budget and maybe force you to go back and rework things?
Changing the law is a big one.
For sure.
Tort reform, there's so many ways that you could have your practice impacted that you have to be willing to bob and weave and modify with.
We had that here in Georgia recently. We had tort reform. Pretty sweeping. And I had some firms that did negligent security. That was kind of their bread and butter. Tough cases to get, expensive cases to get, and tort reform more or less crushed that practice area. So now they're pivoting and now they're spending on other things that are actually more expensive than that. But changing the law can be a big one, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And you got to be on top of it with not only the campaigns, but the budget that you're putting toward it.
Another variable is changes in the way you get presented digitally. Your Google business profile gets taken down. What just happened? You had hundreds of leads coming in from your Google business profile. You had hundreds of reviews on your Google business profile, and it's gone now. It's happened many times that I've seen.
They took mine down this year.
Yeah.
For my company. Took it down January 1.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. For reasons unknown. Yeah. Take that bullshit down.
No, it's happened to some of my clients too. And we go through a process to get it republished. And I mean, you can have insurance policies on that stuff now. That's how volatile it is. And you really have to go through and make sure you have that tight. But that's a variable that's a concern. Another big advertising variable that you can't rely on is Google LSA ads. You might be getting a great response from them 1 month, and then next month it might fall off.
100%.
And you won't necessarily know why it happened or be able to control it.
Yep.
And it could be the smallest minor thing that impacted it. like you missed 2 phone calls and now you were getting 30 leads a month that were translating to 5 cases, and it's down to 5 leads a month.
We should do an episode on vulnerability. And because that's kind of what I hear you talking about is vulnerability in the practice. And we're talking about budgets in this episode, but the vulnerability there. The one that I've had impact some of my clients lately is a partner leaving. A partner leaves the firm who is kind of the figurehead in a certain practice area. And that practice area has been decimated because that person left. Well, that's going to naturally affect a lot of things at your firm, but it's certainly going to affect your marketing budget and what you should be spending to bring in those cases that partner and his or her group was handling.
I've seen that too. I've seen a partner develop to the point that they were contributing 50% of the cases.
Yeah.
But, I take that back. An associate developed to the point that they were contributing 50% of the cases.
Yeah.
When I first talked to the firm about that, I was like, we need a contingency plan.
Yeah.
What if he leaves? And it wasn't.
Let me guess what they said. He's not going anywhere.
No, I think they were sensitive to the idea of how important they were to how they were growing, but they weren't ready to make a change in the way of partnership offering.
Yeah.
So I said, you got to be realistic here. And within 3 months, they left. It wasn't my idea, but they did leave the firm.
Really?
And the firm lost that potential of 50% of the, and we made shifts in the marketing spend and did a lot of things around the budget to try to influence what happened there.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle.
Yeah. There are pitfalls that will impact the budget. Again, we're talking in terms of the budget, but they'll impact your whole firm and they can crush your firm, and personnel is a big one. Even a lawyer doesn't leave but gets in trouble, God forbid, gets in trouble, gets suspended, or gets, something happens, bad publicity, or they do something that hits the airwaves, which these days we see more and more of that. That can impact your budget. And I think one of the keys maybe to take from this discussion is you've got to insure against those types of things at your firm. And it is where I think sometimes an outside perspective can shed some light on it. And we're able to tell them, hey, look, you're vulnerable right here, right?
Yeah. That's definitely one where we highlighted it. But circling back to the specific budget-related ideas here, Google LSAs is one where firms sometimes are winning with great cost per lead, great cost per acquisition, and it's just like, okay, we want more of that.
Yeah.
The frustrating thing with that from a marketing budget perspective is just because you want more from that doesn't mean you can get it.
Yeah.
You can't just necessarily double your available marketing spend there and spend it. So that's another variable in the budget that is really kind of a pain in the neck.
Yeah, I had a firm here in Atlanta that I was marketing LSAs for, and there were points last year, mid-year, where their LSA spend was about $25K a month. And in the last few months, it's gone down to under $1,000. Same campaign, same settings generally. Now, I fuss with them a little bit. But why does that happen? We're not always sure. We can't fix it. We don't control it.
Yeah, I mean, there's other influences. There's other firms that are bidding into those positions and trying to capture the same leads.
How your intake might be handling those leads can impact how many you're getting.
Google's listening to all those calls. So you don't necessarily know what your intake person is saying sometimes, and they might say something that gets you burned on your LSA campaign.
No question. All right. What about comparing to other firms in your space, comparing your budget to competitors? Do you find that firms do that for better or for worse, and how does that impact things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mistake, but one comparison is we got Morgan & Morgan. I can't compete with them to the point that you feel like it's futile to do the marketing.
Yeah, throw up your hands strategy.
That's a bad comparison, right? Yeah. You have to compete with them, but you won't do it with the same techniques that they're using. So, and then there's just people in your competitor space that are trying things that are that may be working well. But you don't know why they're working well or what the dynamics of that are. So in those cases, you might try something, but you shouldn't necessarily expect the same results. You shouldn't assume.
Yeah. I get frustrated a lot with my clients who make assumptions about what other firms are doing and how well they're doing with it, because they have no idea. Unless you're an insider at another firm, you work there, or you've seen their stuff, or you're a consultant like Carl and I, you don't know what that firm is spending, and you don't know what they're doing. Over the years, Carl, we've had firms that are spending more than anybody would ever imagine that they're spending. Nobody knows what they're spending, and they're spending. And then we have firms that are at the opposite end of the spectrum. Everybody thinks they're spending a lot, and they're spending very little.
Matt, do you think these firms that they're comparing themselves to are all telling them exactly what they're spending and the truth about what they're doing and their results?
Right. Not only that, but you factor in difference in intake and thresholds, what cases they'll take and what ones they turn away. There's 1,000 variables that go into a firm's performance. But yet a lot of the folks I've dealt with over the years, they'll simplify it. They're like, oh, I see this guy's doing billboards. He must be spending a ton. And I'm like, not really. I've got a firm right now that has 5 billboards up in Northwest Georgia, and their total monthly billboard budget's about $2,600. Now, they're smaller boards, but they're great placements. So, people think, oh, they're spending a massive amount of money. Not really, but we see that a lot. I think comparing to other firms and making assumptions about other firms is a huge mistake when it comes to budget.
I agree.
Anything to add?
No, you got to work within your firm and within what your firm can do. That's my take on it. It doesn't matter what your competition's doing.
I don't think you have anything to add because I'm very thorough in my explanations.
Well, good job, Matt.
Thanks, Carl. We're kind of having a moment here, aren't we?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to add on budgets? What do you think are good budgets, Carl? Give me some numbers. I know we just talked about how everything depends and there's a million factors that go into it and there's a million variables and all that's true. And there really is no way to tell somebody what a good budget is or isn't. But I'm going to ask you to do that. Give me some budgets for different firms you've worked with over the years. We won't name any names, but what do you think? Let's say an estate planning firm. Let's say you've got a local estate planning firm. Maybe it's countywide and you're near a major metro. What would be a reasonable marketing budget, do you think? We're not going to hold you to it because there are too many factors, but let's just throw out some numbers for the hell of it.
For something like that, I think you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 a month, and you could be driving $500,000 to $1 million in revenue. With that, you probably could be close to $1 million once you're established and effective and drive above that.
Totally agree. I think that's a great budget for that firm. I think it's far less than a lot of firms that fit that description are spending. I think a lot of firms would look at that and say, there's no way, that's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
But it's what, 3 estate plans? It's the cost of 3 or 4 estate plans, maybe.
Yeah, I think with a $15,000 to $20,000 a month budget, you're probably going to be doing $10,000 to $15,000 a month out of that, and pay for your marketing easily.
Yeah. Okay. What about a criminal defense firm? What about somebody doing DUI, misdemeanors, maybe sprinkling some felonies, countywide practice, maybe 3 or 4 countywide practice, total monthly marketing budget?
If you're relying on digital, probably 10 to 15, which is a lot of what the type of firm would be doing. I think 10 to 15.
I think that's a little low for me. Now, if it's a solo practitioner, yeah, that's probably fine. I think if you've got 3, 4 lawyers, maybe you're looking more at 20 to 30 in marketing budget. But that's in the ballpark. You're not spending $50,000 a month, but you're not spending 3 either or 4.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, I don't think you're the TV advertiser or the billboard advertiser if you're a criminal DUI attorney. Not that there aren't criminal DUI billboards that are out there, but in those cases, I feel like a lot of times they might have a PI side of the practice too, or they're just a little bit bigger firm.
Yeah. Let me talk about bankruptcy. I think I've dealt with more bankruptcy firms, worked with more bankruptcy firms, consumer bankruptcy firms than you have over the years. I've worked with several across the nation in the last few years. I think our average cost per case acquisition was somewhere around $300 to $500 a case.
Okay.
So you could back those numbers out to see. Now, a lot of it's going to depend if you're doing Chapter 7s or 13s. 13s come with a pretty nice fee these days. Of course, there's more work involved, but the average cost per case acquisition that I've seen in consumer BK is somewhere between $300 and $500 a case. So, if your average case value is, let's say, $4,000, between your 7s and 13s, you could do the math and figure out what you need to spend. What about PI firms? That's what everybody wants to know. What about PI firms? Let's say you're a regional firm. You'll handle cases statewide. You're a regional firm, 5 lawyers. You're obviously competing with the big players in the industry. What do you think is enough of a budget? Reasonable budget for a practice that falls in that description.
With injury firms, you start looking at the revenue and take a percentage of it for your budget. So if your revenues are at $2 million, 25% of that is $500,000 marketing spend, right? So in that case, I'd look at $500,000 in marketing spend
annually.
Annually, yeah.
Yeah. And so is that how you do it for PI firms? That you wanna know their annual revenues and work off a percentage of that?
I'd like to know it. And that's quick math, easy math. You might be investing more than 25%. You might be investing 30 or 40%.
Sure.
Depends on what your growth plan is, right? And I think that's a good place to start, though.
Yeah, agreed. What other practice areas have I left out? What about divorce? What about family law?
The family law clients I work with invest between $10,000 and $20,000 a month, and they operate between $1 and $2 million in revenue. That's where they sit.
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on your average case value, right? Because we've worked with family law firms where they're really cherry picking the high end cases, right? The stuff that's going to go north of $10K, sometimes north of $20K in fees earned. And so they're spending a little bit more to try to attract that clientele. But I think you're right, 10 to 20, depending on the size of the firm and how many lawyers you have, maybe a little bit more than that if you're going after the bigger stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a different dynamic when you look at revenue with them because they're a billable hour format and they collect retainers and they have to put it in trust and bill back against the trust until it's gone, and then they rebill for a new retainer.
Yeah.
And it kind of fluid, but I think that most of my clients, when they're representing somebody who's going through a divorce and it's contested, they're going to be driving 20 to 40K in revenue from that client over the course of a year or a year.
Really,
and a
that
half.
much, huh?
Yeah, it just adds up.
Yeah.
And it depends on the struggle in that family law case, but
people like to fight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting. And I feel like the need to put a disclaimer out there on those numbers because somebody's going to cite them and say, Carl and Matt are idiots. They're saying you should spend this, but we're not governed by the Bar Association or anything, so we can kind of say what we want.
It's true, and it does depend.
It does depend. I mean, I have firms that spend way more than their average competitor, but they're crushing it. So God bless. So, all right. Any other parting shots on setting a budget for your firm, Carl? We've covered it pretty well. 40 minutes.
I think so. I would just say make this a priority for your planning for the next fiscal year. Like, you got to go into Q4 analyzing what's performed this year and ready to make decisions about what you're going to invest next year.
That's 100%. It really should start October 1st, looking at the performance of the past year and prior years and really trying to come up with the right number for the subsequent year. All right, cool. Well, thanks, Carl. Great episode. Appreciate it. Appreciate our listeners. Another episode of the Law Firm CMO Playbook podcast in the books. Signing off from the studio in Atlanta, Matt and Carl. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Thanks for tuning in to the Law Firm CMO Playbook podcast, where we help legal industry leaders implement smarter marketing and achieve stronger growth. This show is sponsored in part by Proven Law Marketing and Complete Law Marketing. For more information or to subscribe and listen to future episodes, visit cmoforlaw.com. That's CMOFOR law.com. We'll see you next time.